They had to pull glass out of my head at the ER. And literally, he said, you were within an inch of death. And mind you, when it happened, the first thing I was thinking about, because I was taking out my headphones out of one of my headphones out of my ear and putting it into my case. And first thing I thought about as that was happening is, no, my headphones, just me being me.
Almost dying taught me how to live. Being struck by a car left me in a 3.5-week coma with 15 broken bones and 16 surgeries to complete, including brain surgery. However, I woke up from that coma in an even greater place than I ever foresaw for myself. How? The universe will guide you out of the darkness and into the light if you allow it. Often, spirituality comes off as too highbrow. I'm not about that. Welcome to the podcast that talks and teaches about it through the lens of humor. Together, we'll harness positive energy and use it to work with the universe, all while giggling the entire time. Welcome to Gabriella Rebranded. Win most, lose some. Well, today I am talking with Ryan Bacchas, founder and creator of the New Atlantis, a holistic medicine company with its tenets really based in a lot of the spiritual stuff I believe in, about leaving the world better than we found it and bleeding positivity into the world. But in addition to that, you've had a crazy lengthy political career. You've been in politics since you were 19. That's insane.
Hence all the lines in my face.
And you were so important to Governor Gavin Newsom, especially during the pandemic and California's COVID response. You allocated $50 million in stimulus checks. Am I?
It was $50 million in business grants for small businesses, but the California Golden State stimulus, that was my idea.
That was your idea. That's insane. So smart. Again, starting at 19. And this year, the Marquee Who's Who named you an emerging leader, which is very exciting. Well, now I guess last year, 2024. And that's very exciting. And then I told you I was going to say this. You did my favorite thing. You got cannabis to be essential during COVID. Yes. So let's tell the story of when we met.
Yes, please.
Yes, because I always do my spiritual moment of the week on this podcast. But I decided for your episode, the moment I wanted to tell is how we met, because that was a spiritual moment. So I went to a podcast launch for our friend Nadej. Nadej's brand is Pleasure Science, and she has a podcast now that goes with Pleasure Science. It is incredible. Absolutely check it out. It's about everything sex related. I've learned so much from Nadej about literally just how to flirt. Truly, truly incredible. But I was going to her podcast launch because I'm brand new to this, and Nadej has been very helpful and very instrumental in telling me stuff I needed to make sure I was doing while I'm starting my podcast. And I met you just as another guest. And
almost on a whim, but like I told you, you just magically appeared out thin air. I was like, who is this?
Just at this little launch party. And I think we've got each other's Instagrams. And I don't know if I gave you my personal or my podcast Instagram. I don't even know if I'd announced my podcast yet when we announced.
You hadn't. It was your personal. And I found out about your podcast through you posting in your stories. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. Then went obviously to follow your podcast page. And that's when I saw your story.
Yeah. And so I think, because we've been talking a lot and we really believe a lot of the same things spiritually. And then we both have backgrounds in trauma. And we both believe that you say it the best way, using trauma as fuel. Yes. And it's sort of brought us to the place we are now. And I'm so curious to hear more about that, as to what piece of that led to you forming the New Atlantis.
It goes a great deal into, my political background, the years I spent in, political lobbying, not just here in California, but federally as well. And just, the reasons why I started, as far as trauma that started this whole venture overall. Being homeless on a park bench with your mother is a great inspiration and feel. It makes you think, wow, of course, never want to be here in this situation again, let alone while you're in college. But what I could take from this to help other people, no matter what they're going through in their life, to see that there is light on the other end of the tunnel, one, but that where you are doesn't have to be where you stay. And you can use that as fuel, or you can use that as a crutch to be woe is me, to be stuck in that victim mentality, or look for your inner guidance to drive you to what your future can be, not just where your past is or where your present is. So, funny enough, with the new Atlantis, I was already looking at, starting my own venture in health and wellness. And it came after really, I guess you could say, just some disgruntlement. Being completely transparent, I was pretty pissed with the direction the cannabis industry was going. I use quotations because of the fact that a lot of people know in the cannabis world, my mentor, Craig Barish, is the one who wrote Prop 215 with Bill Panzer. His best friend was Dennis Perone. He stood on the front lines with Jack Herrera, Rick Finn, Debbie Dart, Donna Lambert, all of the OGs of the movement. And that's how we have an industry, is because of the fact that it took a movement of people to drive away not just the stigma, but drive home the mindset of this is what this is truly about, making the world a better place and helping people who need access to this as a medicine, the whole patients over profits movement. And, just seeing how people have gone to everything that cannabis is not about, the greed, the corporatism, a lot of those factors is what led to me eventually, not just as a political lobbyist, leaving the movement, but in a lot of ways politics in general. Because as I tell people, cannabis was my claim to fame, especially managing the biggest petition firm in the country to legalize, as well as save their whole season. I mean, it was the biggest season for the state as far as petition ballots that were going to voters for us to vote on in 2016. So cannabis has always been my passion, because I looked at it at 20 years old when Craig took me under his wing, knowing what this is going to do for people and what this is going to do for the world. And to see that being the complete opposite and people turning it into basically everything that we've seen with the tobacco industry, the alcohol industry, it just turned me off in a lot of ways. And then politics being hyper polarized and people not being able to see why they are in a position of power to help people, and it became so ego driven. I said, this is enough for me. It was draining, not just soul sucking wise, but mentally. And I needed a fresh start. So, the new Atlantis, originally, I wanted to start a health and wellness company. And, some of my colleagues, because I had assisted Germany with some of their legalization, giving them the framework, 1,000 pages of case studies, analysis, is everything that went into, my work here in the States. And everybody was like, well, why not build a cannabis company? Which that is still part of our disciplines. But again, it goes back to cannabis is a health and wellness. I won't say business or anything of that nature, because it shouldn't be looked at just as a business, but it is medicine from the earth.
Yeah.
So where I came to with the new Atlantis is I had a dream back in college when I was 18 about, basically, I was surrounded by water. I was looking out at the distance, at the ocean, the sun glimmering off of it. And I caught one of my college buddies, older gentleman friend at the time as well. He and I had a class together. I asked him, what do you think that was about? Telling him the dream and everything. He said, I think you were having a dream about Atlantis. And I had several other dreams about it. And, looking back on that experience, at that time I was 28 building the company. So looking back at that experience, I'm like, 10 years later, this is starting to make sense. So the reason why the new Atlantis, specifically that name, not just the dream, the fall of Atlantis happened because of super acceleration in technology, where things in society, particularly being in a patriarchal society, began to be more left-minded oriented. People started to be out of touch with their emotional side. People started to be out of touch with their spiritual side. And the earth came to such a low vibration that the island sunk. In today's age, we're seeing that, obviously, with the rise of AI and a lot of other things that, hey, it's great to fly rocket ships to Mars and all these other things, but there are so many problems we could be diverting that, not just financial capital, but that mental capital into solving problems here on Earth. That these are great innovations, don't get me wrong, but we're missing something here, which is we're repeating mistakes of the past. But in that same coin, you see the consciousness shift of people understanding what they're putting in their bodies. The backlash against Kellogg's and all these other companies who have been feeding people poison for years now, for decades, really. And you're starting to see a consciousness shift where instead of the vibration lowering, it's starting to heighten. And people's consciousness is starting to heighten at that same coin. So instead of sinking, we're actually going almost into a reversal of where the Atlantis is rising again.
Okay, and that's why it's the new Atlantis, because Atlantis is coming back.
Yes.
I like that. I have so much to say because that was, wow. I got so much from that. One of the things, just to respond, that I wanted to say is that cannabis, as it pertains to medicinal use, I wouldn't have known if it wasn't, or not that I wouldn't have known. Obviously, I knew it was important for health, but I personally wouldn't have resonated with that if my accident hadn't happened. I was someone who I wasn't no Virgin Mary. I went to USC. I smoked weed. I hit bongs, but it wasn't something I ever sought out. I never purchased it. It wasn't something I was ever interested in buying. And then my first year post-grad, so in 2021, up until I got hurt, so January 2021 to when I got hurt in October, I started taking edibles more just because I lived with people who did. So I started taking them more, but not consistently, just more often, I suppose. And then my accident happened. And now I need to smoke at the end of the day. I need to. My dad's going to be so mad. He's going to hear this. No, but I need, it is the only thing that shuts my brain off. And what I would always take edibles. That was the route I used to go. But then I found out that actually makes your sleep worse.
Yes.
Because it stays in your system and it takes longer for the body to process, because it's 8 hours or whatever for the body to process, and your brain never falls into the deep state of sleep.
Yes.
But if you smoke, that's out of your system in an hour. So if you fall asleep after an hour, you will eventually go into the deeper states of sleep. So now it is truly what I need to go to sleep. And also a lot of times when I'm on my mental spirals, because, I am prone to those,
Yes.
It is the only thing that stops them. I never use it as a way out. I am purely dictated to figuring out how to get through it sober. But after I've gotten through the mental spiral and I smoke, I'm oh, there was no reason to freak out. Everything was fine the entire time. So because of that, I very much understand how crucial it is to the health system. And because of that, because not everybody who's listening to this is from California, can you just clarify what Prop 215 is exactly?
So Prop 215 was the original at that time, medical marijuana, of course, the slang acronym for it. But it was the original medical measure that kickstarted everything. As, the great saying here in California is, as California goes, the nation goes, and so the world goes. So if it hadn't happened, we wouldn't have had even the progress we've had over these past, 20, almost 30 years now. So one of the major things is, that was where you started to see, of course, more people's slow acceptance of it. People were coming here to California to be able to, use cannabis, whether it was, of course, medically or, recreationally, just to understand it. And, one of the main things that, is unfortunate with Prop 64 is it blanketed Prop 215 because Prop 215 was specifically a constitutional amendment, which means it's written in our state constitution. You cannot take that away from people. So, with that being said, like I was telling you a little bit about earlier before, airing, the problem is the acceptance that was built was taken away a little bit because recreation, that's why they say adult use or responsible
Yeah,
use,
yeah, yeah.
because, it's being treated more so as alcohol, as
Yeah.
tobacco. It's not being treated as that medical product that you're giving access and wide access to people without not just the access part, but also the penalty part, because nobody should be penalized for medicine. I mean, when you go and buy amoxicillin, you aren't paying taxes on your medicine.
Yeah.
And that's one of the biggest problems that a lot of people don't realize is all use of cannabis, even if people are overdoing it, is still medical. Because just like you said, you need it for your sleep. I mean, that's, I've always said it. I'd rather somebody reach for that, instead of something in their medicine cabinet, which is a pharmaceutical and going to
Exactly.
hurt your liver, hurt your other organs or bodily functions, and just is made of synthetic compounds. That isn't the way. And if nature made it, why not take it?
Exactly.
Obviously, I'm not advocating we use poison ivy as a skincare treatment.
Yeah.
But that really is, the case. And a lot of people have gone away from this understanding of how much of a benefit it is for us to have wide access to it. But of course, as you know, we're in a capitalistic society, so there has to be, unfortunately, a quid for the quo. And that's where we are right now. And, Prop 215, without all those original, movement shakers and makers who, going back to, like I said, my mentor, Craig Barish, the Dennis Perones, the Jack Herreras, the Bill Panzers, all of those gentlemen and the gentlewomen who they put their lives on the line for this. We wouldn't have had the progress that we've had in 30 years, even 40, 50 years of the movement starting. So it goes back to the why.
Mm-hmm.
What is the reason that people see what its importance is? It's not just, hey, we know it's important now. All of a sudden, medical studies and scientific studies are coming out. There have to be people to lay down the foundation for, hey, you guys are abstinent to even doing this. Let us show you and push open this door to force you into looking at this.
Yeah.
Because there was always going to be that stigma otherwise. There was always going to be, like how we're seeing right now, a lot of people are looking at what is going to happen with doctors and medical journals colluding to working with pharmaceutical companies to cover up some of these pharmaceutical drugs that really are harmful for us. And I mean, cannabis is still 0 on the scorecard as far as killing anybody.
Yeah.
So
yeah. No, I always say, when it's like, I smoke weed every day. I'm always like, well, you know what? It could be meth. It could be meth. So we'll take it. But no, how I use it for my sleep, like sleeping pills are incredibly addictive. Like
Yes.
Xanax would be way worse to be abusing than cannabis. And just going back to the whole pharmaceutical companies and how doctors and, the collusion and all that stuff, the business side of the medical industry really grosses me out. My father's a doctor. My brother's a resident at Wake Forest University Hospital. So like the medicinal side, like I'm obviously a champion. I'm obviously a supportive. Look how amazing I look. If you saw what I looked like and what was done to me, like the medicinal side, yes. But the business side of the healthcare system, insurance company, I mean, Luigi Mangione, like it is so corrupt what it has become, not what it is becoming, what it has become. And it's only going to become more corrupt. And the new Atlantis, holistic medicine, is in a sense rivaling that.
Yes. One of the foundations for it is, we've officially entered the healthcare space through a partnership with the brand. Also, a good friend of mine, soul brother as well. It's a copper embedded antimicrobial scrub. And now
Ooh.
and now a lot of people are starting to realize, of course, the microplastics from even the clothes we wear. And especially in the healthcare space, with COVID, a lot of the illnesses that were coming along because people had a compromised immune system from COVID were healthcare related illnesses. They were things that because you're taking care of somebody with sepsis, you bring that bacteria on your figs or on whatever you're wearing, and you're taking it to the next patient. So, the thing is for us, in all facets, whether it's general wellness, whether it's gut health, whether it's, superfoods, healthcare, beauty, because that's a big thing as well. A lot of people are starting to learn about some of the synthetic chemicals that are in skincare products. The reason why they feel so good is because they're putting silicone in it.
I know.
All these factors. And like I tell the team all the time, there has to be an ethos behind everybody who we work with. We've had a lot of companies come to us, and mind you, we just rebranded back at the beginning of October. So everything everybody has been seeing for these past 3 months is very much not new for us, but it's new as far as what we're doing because we saw the need of people needing, again, going back to that word, access to something better. You're always going to have the poison stuff out there, but if you have at least a choice to go and make that decision, that determination for yourself to say, I want to get away from the fake stuff and get to the good stuff, it's going to be there.
Yeah.
And especially at an affordable price, because I think that's really a big problem that a lot of people are seeing. I used to co-own a health and wellness store when I was 22 back in San Bernardino. And within recent years, organic and, raw, whatever you want to call it, food and health supplements, all of these different, items have become popular and people are really taking advantage of that and price gouging, but also doing things that are not necessarily kosher for the consumer. And for me, like I've always told people, our mission should always be to take care of each other. If you wouldn't take it, then why are you going to give it to somebody else? Steve Jobs didn't let his kids have iPads, clearly for a reason.
Yeah.
The CEO of McDonald's doesn't let his kid eat McDonald's. There's a reason for all of these facets. And when we start to peel back the layers of the onion, the layers of the onion, not Shrek, we get to the truth. And, the truth, it does hurt, but I'd rather live in the truth than live in a lie. And I'd rather for other people to live in the truth as well, because that sets us free. It really does.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, truth is, it's the only way to move forward a lot of times. And I remember in college finding out the stuff that I had put in my hair for years had carcinogens in them. And now I check everything that I put on my skin on the app Yuka and also on the EWG website. I cross-examine to find out what I'm buying. And then also I recently found out in December, I was a friend told me this and I was shell-shocked to learn this. And this has to do with access, that women's feminine care products, everything that is sold in stores like pads, tampons, has lead, has carcinogens, has things that disrupt your endocrine system. And the only way to buy these, because there are organic tools that exist that you can use more safely to keep that punani safe. But they're, one, more expensive. Two, you have to order them online, so you don't have access to them. I would know. I ordered a box at the end of December, and it still hasn't come. And it's the January 7th today?
Yes.
Yeah, and it still hasn't come. So it's not an immediate access. And we live in a society, capitalism gatekeeps health and makes it something only the elite have access to.
It's unfortunate, and absolutely. I'm gonna take a wild guess here and say that you got them on Amazon, because I have stuff that I got off of Amazon. It still hasn't come in now 3 weeks.
I did not. I ordered directly from the store because I also am Amazon. I'm trying to order from Amazon less. It's hard because they make it convenient, but I know big business isn't good.
Well, it's the nature of the beast. And that's where, I think a lot of people, they're starting to come into their power and realizing, not just purchase power, but it's always I go to the power of consciousness. The more we put our thoughts into certain things, the more we give that power to them naturally. And with brands, I mean that's just it's as a businessman, I will say this, I've noticed over the years that the biggest brands are the ones who were able to convince people more of something that they aren't. And that's where people are starting to realize it's great to be that person that, hey, I'm right there with you. When I go to buy anything at the supermarket, I'm there standing, even if it's for 10 minutes, going through every option that I have and looking at the ingredients.
Yes.
And I don't care if I look crazy. I would look crazier putting poison into my body and not caring.
Yeah.
And same for you. And, that's one of the things for, I was raised by a single mother. So, it's always been, at the heart and the core of, a lot of things I do, but especially a lot of things for what we're doing to make sure that women's health is at the forefront. Because, even when my mom would educate me on how women's products are naturally more expensive than men's products, I was flabbergasted because I'm like, how? I had to, the simplest way put, how? Like that makes no sense to me. Because at the end of the day, women, you guys have superpowers that men will never have. We can't give life. We don't have the level of intuition that you have. So for me, things like even that, as far as feminine care, that there is no way that there should be lead or poison, any type of chemical in any product, let alone products for you guys, because that's not cool. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, I guess to sound so informal.
No, but it's just like, that's fucked up.
It is. It really is.
It's just like, well, I need this to go about my life, but you're making me need something that is going to harm me and not ever access. I can go because I am coming from a place of privilege. Like, I'm a white girl. I'm in Los Angeles. I can go online and I have the power and the access and the resources to order myself products that are more safe for me. But other people, most women they don't even know. They aren't even aware. And then even if you are aware, it's not readily available to pick up safe products at your local pharmacy. You have to plan in advance. Get it on the internet. Like, it's a whole...
No, I completely understand that. And you're absolutely right, because I think, that's something people are starting to understand. I remember in college, reading The Secret in class, and we watched the video, and then we were mandated to read the book. Mandated, sorry, that's one of those political words. But, I thought about it. I'm like, yeah, to tell somebody they're suffering is great and all, but tell that to a kid in Darfur that doesn't have clean water. Like that's a little insensitive and just, not necessarily accurate. And the access to education, that's lacking worldwide. So you talk about, definitely when you do have the resources to the education and the information, that's the first step. But then the access to actually being able to obtain those type of products, that's very scarce in 78% of the world.
Yeah.
So, to your point, absolutely. I think that's where we have an obligation in, as they say, the first world countries, to be able to say we have so much overflow of abundance and we don't give back to the rest of the world, and we don't take care of people who they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the privilege, to using your word, they don't have all of these things that we have in the States. Regardless of what caste system you come from in the States, they don't even have the means to go about getting, again, to a pharmacy.
Yeah.
Because in most of the world, they don't have pharmacies.
Exactly, yeah.
So, even then you go to the internet. Well, shoot, most places in the world still don't have access to internet unless it's on their phone, and they still have to, go somewhere to a modernized town to access Wi-Fi or access a computer, whatever the case may be. So, yeah, absolutely. I think there's right now, it's almost like we're at the precipice of there's the biggest disconnect, but there's the biggest bridge to connect as well. And because we are so interconnected now, because of the internet, that we have the ability to use it more so as the tool that it was meant to be used as. Unfortunately, obviously, people are always going to look up silly prank videos. That's, their prerogative, and that's fine. Everybody needs a good laugh. Like you said, laughter is the best medicine.
Laughter is the best medicine. It is. It's gotten me as far as I am. Yeah.
It's a balance. And I think because as you'll get to know me, I always tell people I'm not going to speak on what I don't know. I'm going to speak on what I do know. But being an observer, I think, it's one of those things where it's hard to dictate what type of decisions people make in their life because of the fact you don't know what everybody's going through, right?
Yeah.
And, speaking, to the trauma, I mean, your trauma was, like I said, it was one of the most painstaking stories I ever heard. But it was also one of the greatest inspirations I ever heard because despite anything that I've gone through in my life, I can always say, well, shoot, I mean, if you can do it, then, I can do it. Anybody can do it. Everybody can look past their circumstance of where they're at and not let that determine where they can be in life, right?
I appreciate you saying that so much, but also I think it goes both ways because I look at you and I think you were homeless. You still found a way to get through school, and you were a lobbyist by 19 and a business owner by 22, all while being homeless. Like I could never fathom you told me the story of Christmas Day on a park bench with your mother, homeless at 19. And that is a pain I could never, ever fathom. So I think all trauma survivors, we are somehow united because even though our trauma is very different, we know the same, it's not a coincidence that we both have the same sort of spiritual tenets and similar spiritual beliefs and want to bring the same things to the world.
Right.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about that. Just talk a little bit about your experience with homelessness and putting yourself through school, because that is just a very interesting piece of trauma. And you're talking about access to education. That's a big one.
Funny enough, as far as education is concerned, so how that even happened, my mom, she used to be a school teacher for LAUSD, and she got injured on her job working with special needs children. So, because we live in capitalistic society, battling the insurance companies since I was 8 years old, that led to a lot of that happening. And also having not so much of a great family. No knock at them, but yeah, knock at them. It's one of those things of where, again, like I said, it was since I was 8 that this was happening. She had multiple surgeries, cervical spine injury, arthritis, and carpal tunnel on both her wrists, lower back injuries, just the whole nine. And we were homeless for Christmas. We were able to on and off get, a hotel room, whatever it was. Eventually, fortunately, she was able to get housing. But, at that time, there was no housing apparatus for young teens, which I actually found out later that year that I believe it was 46% of teenagers in America were homeless, especially kids in college. So it was one of those things where, again, I go back to even at this state in my life, no matter how bad it could be for you, you still have to, of course, not blanket your own suffering, blanket your own pain, and not recognize it, but you have to be able to realize, there are other people going through that circumstance, and how fortunate are you to have the awareness, the ability to have will and drive your purpose into your being and be able to come out of those situations. So, I was basically towards the end of that semester, sleeping behind a park bench. I would get up early every morning, 4:00, take the first bus up to campus, shower, go to class, everything. And fortunately, that summer, had to have one of my best friends from high school who I was staying with him at his place in Venice. And of course, I was hustling weed at the same time.
Yeah.
Hey, it's legal now, so I'm not incriminating myself anymore.
You were
But
homeless. I mean, what were you supposed to do? Yeah.
exactly. And, it's not like I was trying to be the world's biggest drug lord or something.
But you're trying to eat. Yeah.
Trying to eat, trying to get to the next part of my destination. And it was just one of those things where throughout that whole situation, as I will tell everybody, God, the universe, big part of why I'm out, because I said, when you get me out of this situation, I will use it as a testament to being, not only who I need to be in life and serving the mission I have here on earth, but being an inspiration for other people. Clearly, funny sense of humor they have. But yeah, that was really, in short, the learning experience is, when I look back now, is if I didn't just take it step by step, if I had been in that victim mentality, which it's easy to fall into. And unfortunately, because of, what we see, especially, in the world and even here in the States, the haves and the have-nots, that widening more so these days, especially, it's easy to fall prey into. And for me, I look at, again, I am blessed, I'm privileged to have a mindset that just said, I am not going to let this be, where it ends. And I've had some experience, even actually, funny enough, 2 years ago, 3 days before my birthday, was on October 5th in 2022, where I almost died. 2023. And, nothing near the degree of what you went through, but I had a glass bottle, coincidentally, of New Amsterdam, cracked over my head. And you could probably still see the scar, but it was from here to the middle of my forehead. They had to pull glass out of my head at the ER. And literally, he said, you were within an inch of death. And mind you, I never, like I tell anybody, take things lightly. But when it happened, the first thing I was thinking about, because I was taking out my headphones out of my ear and putting it into my case. And first thing I thought about as that was happening is, no, my headphones, that just me being me, of course, more worried about my headphones and my music than what just happened. But, everybody asked, you didn't pass out or anything, you didn't faint. It's like, no, I mean, upstairs got me. Clearly it just wasn't my time. And clearly that was another part of the testimony is, first of all, one, it's going to take a lot more than that to take me out of this world.
Yeah.
But, hey, I mean, sometimes we forsake life. We really do. And it takes experiences like that to not be so lackadaisical in our everyday life and to see purpose and meaning in every second. I always have journaled, but especially, more so in these recent years because of the fact that, hey, whether it's, 3 crows outside your doorstep or, the squirrel that comes and gets nuts from you, like literally, I have a squirrel that he always, every time he sees me, he runs up to my door. He's like, you got something for me? Like, and, just those moments. I mean, how beautiful is it to wake up every day, not just be alive, but to have opportunity each day? That's something I think a lot of us, we take for granted, especially here where we have so much opportunity, we have so much abundance that, for us, if we're hungry, we can go grab a snack. We could go to the restaurant. We could, meet our friends. We could go grab coffee. 87% of the world can't do that.
Can't do that. Yeah. You said that it's funny that people who find you inspiring. I think it's hilarious that people find me inspiring, and you are one of those people. I'm like, what, me?
Don't find it so hilarious. I mean, I'm serious. You even when I think about it, when we talk, and I'm just like, I not to sound soft because I don't want anybody again to twist it. But no, I really cried because I'm like, man, here I am. There are moments where I get frustrated with even little things, because, I'm a Libra, so it does take a lot
Oh my
for it to
God.
add up.
You're a Libra. I'm an Aries. We're perfect opposites.
Exactly. So wind and fire. And,
Yes.
it's funny because it takes oxygen for fire to ignite.
That's why they help each other grow. Yeah.
Hence why we met. And hence why, it's, like I said, it was destiny that you just popped out of thin air like the fairy that you are. And, it's just one of those things where, Gabrielle, stories like yours, it makes people, especially, like I said, people like me, really think and reflect and step back and say, some of the things that we get mad about or get frustrated and, complain about in life really are trivial.
Yeah, most things are. I said my mantra for this year is it's not that deep. Because that's my mantra for this year is it's not that deep. Because so many things, it's like, it's not that deep.
It really isn't.
And just like the things that like we are almost inclined to get upset about, or just like, especially being in your 20s, there's so much stupid bullshit amongst friends and stuff when you're in your 20s. And like the things that we're like inclined to get upset, it's not that deep. It's like, it's really not a big deal.
I hope you trademark that and put it on a t-shirt, because I'm going to, anytime somebody pisses me off, I'm going to point at the shirt.
It's not that deep. It's not that deep. Let's calm down.
But to that point, Gabrielle, you again, you need to give yourself a lot of praise, and not out of ego, but be proud of yourself, because I just turned 30 3 months ago, and I could still be goofy. But you, for still being in your 20s, you are way more mature than most of our generation. And that's a gift. And you should be very, your parents, anybody around you should be looking at you as a gift, because there are so many people who are our ages who they're, first of all, very lost, unfortunately. And, that's why some things in the world have gone the way they've gone. But, they're still looking for their purpose. And that's why I think a lot of people, especially as far as mental health issues, I used to sit on a board for a mental health organization 7 years ago. And at that time, 78% of the population was undiagnosed for some sort of mental illness. So now, obviously, post-COVID, everything that's happened these past 4 years, clearly you could tell who's walking around, even if they're undiagnosed, with some sort of issue.
Yes.
But, especially our generation, because everybody thought we were going to be the ones, and we are, to change the world. And it's just unfortunate because, especially in this matrix, so to speak, you have to make a living. You have to be able to, sustain yourself. All of those things that come with being an adult, of course. But there are so many people who are still waking up. They have, whether it's drug abuse problems, alcohol abuse problems, mental health issues, that they wake up and they question their existence. And I've met some of those people. I've heard from some of those people. And I think it's unfortunate. But this is where we're coming to a point in the world where people are so frustrated because they are starting to find out what their purpose is. And it's not this existence, the way they've painted it for us.
Yeah, I say my accident made me, and I talk about this in the debut episode, premiere episode, whatever you call it.
Which I cannot wait to see.
The first episode next week. But I say that I didn't have a purpose before my accident. And my accident had to happen because the universe had to wake me up. Like, ma'am, I've been trying to tell you your purpose. You haven't been fucking listening. You've been running around doing your own willy-nilly bullshit, and like, you're not paying attention, so I've got to whack you into paying attention. Did it a little forcefully, but whatever. And it took a very long time, but it's interesting because it goes back to the whole victim mentality. I never wanted to be a victim. And I talk about this a lot in my book. I resisted being a victim for so long that it just made me more of a victim. Because the reality of the situation is sometimes we're all victims in terms of circumstances. And that's okay. the way you get over it and the way you don't stay a victim, the way you move through it is you admit that you're a victim. Like, I got hit by a car. I was a victim. And the way to get over it or to get through out of that victim standpoint was to admit and own that I was a victim. But by continuing to deny it and push it away, I just made myself more of a victim because I wasn't addressing the things I needed to address to care for myself. And then I was living in a victim mentality. And it was only when I found spirituality and my mindset shifted that I was like, I don't want to be a victim anymore. So I'm just not going to be. And that was kind of, that led me to my purpose, which is the reason that I have this podcast, because the one thing that trauma gives you is this expansive amount of wisdom that people who haven't lived through trauma, who are fortunately haven't lived through trauma, and a lot of people who don't know why they're here or what this purpose is or what their purpose is. Trauma can give you that. And we have that and they don't. So hopefully via this, I'm letting some of those people really wake up to their purpose and they can, skip the whole coma part.
Well, I'll tell you what, without hope, we have nothing, but I can attest to, I know it will. And I'll tell you right now, you always had a purpose. And just like same with me, I know it was one of those things where, universe was like, hey man, you're like, snap out of it. Like, you're not gonna be a regular kid or regular adult. I need you to wake up, and you always had that purpose. It just took that for you to not only step into it, but for you to be able to put it in perspective.
Yeah.
And, even though I always will say, regarding everything you went through, it's shitty. And I would never wish that on, anybody, even my enemies.
Oh, I would
And
never wish what I went through. I wouldn't wish it on my least favorite part. I have an arch nemesis and I would not wish it on that.
as any superhero character, of course, you have an arch nemesis.
Oh,
I
yeah,
believe that.
I absolutely have an arch nemesis, but I would not wish this on them. Yeah. Well, they don't deserve it. They don't get to know. They don't deserve to know all that I know.
And going back to that part about being a victim, absolutely. I think everybody needs to be able to not be in a state of denial where they're like, yeah, what happened to me was terrible, but big deal. It's like, no, it is kind of a big deal. You need to be able to acknowledge that and be able to basically almost reconcile with it. Because if we don't reconcile with things, it does slowly start to eat us up. And going back to, the part of stepping out of that and not allowing it to be your crutch, not allowing it to be your personality, it's twofold. It's like, yeah, reconcile with it, but use it to move on, become who you're going to be, and use it to empower your purpose, empower your mission, but also empower everything that you already were, but use it to give other people light. Because that's really, I think everybody, there's something we can learn from each other, obviously, but there's something that a lot of people, they can learn from more so from others like you because of the fact that, hey, I mean, people go through shit all the time and, they still don't get the lesson. They still don't obtain this exotic wisdom that is really, I mean, just, it's available to all of us as far as knowledge is concerned. But wisdom comes from decades of experience, and to have it in your 20s. I mean, you skipped grades of spiritual school and life lessons that most people in their 60s and their 70s will never be able to get to. And so for that, I all round of applause to you, because
Thank you.
really, I mean, that is something. I've seen the stories of people who, things have happened to them in life and they've never recovered.
Yeah, I've seen that too. And I don't want to be that. And for that reason, I'm grateful for my experience because I don't want to be that. Yeah. The last thing that we'll talk about is, I said, I have my recommendation in every single episode that supports
Yes.
spiritual growth. And on the episodes I have a guest, I want the guest give me their recommendation. You gave me 4. So
I actually, I thought originally it was supposed to be 4, but I didn't realize until afterwards. I'm like, I think she meant pick one of these
pick
4.
one. Pick one. I was giving examples. I was like, it could be a stand-up show, it could be a movie, it could be a book. And you gave me.
You're like, this guy just said, I'm gonna give you everything. Here you go.
But say the one that you think is the most important. So what is your recommendation that supports spiritual growth of content and why?
Shoot, all of them were great, but I've got to.
You can pick 2.
Look, so I'm gonna tell the first one, being that it is a book. Everybody needs to be reading more, not just on their freaking phone, and especially not the newspaper. That shit is poisonous. The Art of War. And the reason why I say that book is because of the fact that it teaches us a lot about life. And I think, give you the backstory of why that book. My sensei, who, he's still there in technically the marina side of town, but Culver City. He was originally in the Israeli military. He left for various reasons, as I'm sure you can imagine why. And, he took me on basically as his apprentice when I was 11 years old. He didn't give me my black belt at 17 because he said I was too arrogant, which I'm glad he did, because I still did need a lot of growing up in life, because I wasn't getting the primary lesson that he had given to me at that young age, which is you can be a white belt with the skills of a black belt, and you could be a black belt with the mindset of a white belt. And when you get to a point in life where you could diffuse a fight before it even happens, I didn't understand what he was saying at this point. That's when you've reached what a black belt is really. And what he was talking about is the ability to use your mind and the art of de-escalation. If it comes down to it and it's between you and somebody else and you going home, you're going home. Hey, you got to win the fight at all means necessary. But if there is a means to talk through the situation, to use diplomacy in all senses of the word, to avoid confrontation, that's a life skill most of us never get to. We're so easy to fly off at the mouth, be aggressive, be hateful, be full of rage. And one of my sayings is, be at peace even in the midst of war, love even your enemies so full of hate. And when we get to that mentality, we understand what peace within ourselves really is. The second one is A State of Trance. It's a radio show by Armin van Buuren. I credit him because a lot of his music, most of his music got me out of depression. I actually, believe it or not, did have not necessarily thoughts of it, but at a young age, I think this comes with being empaths. We all go through those moments of thinking, what is my life about? Why do I even exist? Not necessarily suicide, but
what's
kind
the
of
point?
close.
Why am I here?
Yeah, and the reason why particularly that radio show, especially when I went to the Netherlands for the first time last year to see his 1,000 celebration, it was life-changing in so many ways. And it was what I needed, especially after all those years of soul sucking, or my soul being sucked in politics. But at the end of every year, he does a year mix. And I would love for you to, listen to it, for your listeners to listen to it, because it goes into everything that the New Atlantis is doing, of course, but everything that we as a humanity and as a people are at in this point in life on this earth. And the message he had was basically the interconnectedness we have as people. And we don't rarely understand it until we realize, wow, hey, this person has this in common. I can learn this from them. They can learn this from me. And, just all those different things. And, we look at things, especially in this country, so transactionally, unfortunately. And we don't understand, hey, yes, again, going back to, like I said, making a living, being, able to sustain all of those factors that go into us, in this quote unquote matrix. I just use that terminology because I think really of us in the society, that's really what it is. And we forget that we have feelings. We have to be empathetic to other people. We have to look at each other as souls, not just as materials. And the point that we are in as a world, we're actually getting to that point. In our New Year's post on Instagram, this is what I told people. This is everybody's year to a large degree, but this really is the year for humanity. The shift in consciousness, the shift in mentality that people are having, people wanting to understand not just themselves more, but understand what is their purpose on earth. And I think everybody's starting to realize our purpose on earth is to take care of each other and to uplift each other. I mean, without each other, what else do we have on this planet?
Yeah.
So.
Well, 2025 is the year for us, because for Aries and Libra, it is the end of a 16-year karmic cycle.
And I did not know that.
It is. For Aries and Libra, this year is the end of a 16-year karmic cycle. No, but that aside, that was beautiful. And I think it's really interesting that you say this is the year of humanity fighting empathy, because I think with what happened this past November, I think we were woken up to how much of a divide there is in empathy throughout this country, and how much of a miscommunication and misunderstanding there is amongst humanity. And I hope that this year is the year of what spirituality is it's realizing how interconnected we all are. And I hope that this year is the year that we do that. And I appreciate how confident you are, and it elevates my confidence.
Well, it's going to take all of us. It always will take a village. And hey, together we can do anything.
Damn straight. Anyway, thank you so much. And this has been Gabriella Rebranded. Win most, lose some. Thank you so much for coming on today, Ryan.
Thank you for having me.
This is amazing. I'm so glad we met.
Yes. Shout out to Nadej.
Shout out to Nadej.